In this video I'm going to show a little bit of rigging in Blender. I had sort of a request, even though I don't really do requests. I thought this would be a good challenge for me to continue learning Blender a little bit more in depth on the rigging side. So I did a rig in 3D Studio a while back for this Death Blossom character from the Infiltrator demo that Epic released quite a while back, so that it can be animated, in Max. And somebody asked me if it's possible to do a Blender version of, a Blender rig to animate in Blender. So I've started taking a look at that, and I thought I would actually make a video of, I guess, my process of figuring things out, and how I do things. Like I said, I'm still learning Blender, so there may or may not be better ways of going about doing things. Usually there are, and but yeah, so I'm gonna, even though I've started the rig already, I had to do some preparation before even making a video, because otherwise I would have a 3-hour long video of me fumbling around not knowing what I'm doing. And so this video is going to be in real time. It's going to be me sort of doing a bit of IK and stuff like that, but based on an existing skeleton that's imported from FBX, which is a little bit screwed up for just direct editing. So I'm gonna go through some stuff that it just requires some extra steps to deal with it, so you can ultimately get a usable animation out of the thing. So I've done one test animation. This is my test. So I've rigged up this leg with IK, and yeah, so it works. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show how I started, and then I'm gonna open my existing file where I've done a little bit of work already. Actually not a lot, but just to show how I kind of get there. So just in case if you watch this video and you you're kind of starting out and you don't even know where to begin. So so first thing, of course, is to get this thing into Blender. So you right click on that, asset actions, export, and export there, and I don't change any settings. Okay, so my Blender setup is a little bit different from the default Blender, that like if you just install Blender, the defaults, I generally use the same kind of shortcuts and all of that. The only thing that I changed is how my viewport works, or the biggest thing I changed is how my viewport works. The one thing that when I started using Blender that was really difficult for me to get past is just simple navigational things. So I set up my navigation to be like 3D Studio. So middle mouse is move, alt middle mouse is rotate, and then I believe in Max, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've used it, funny enough, I think it's Control Alt to zoom, but in Blender I just made it just Control to zoom, but generally I would use the wheel. It's just habit. And then of course Blender is known for having the right click select. I just switched it around to be left click select because, well, yeah, I mean, there's, to me personally, regardless of whether you like right click select or not, there's some inconsistencies there where yes, you select with right click, but sometimes you have to kind of do something with left click that you would think would be right click if it's always right click select. But regardless of any of that, I just thought I would mention that if I mention something that I press, if it's not default Blender, you know, just look up the operation and see what it is. I'm not gonna put on. I've seen people put on like shortcut key things, and this isn't a Blender tutorial really. It's more of a just showing like how I'm gonna go about doing some rigging stuff in here. Okay, so don't remember where I exported it to. Most likely there. Okay, so I'm gonna go with that. So when this comes in, you know, I think the biggest problem that people face when trying to bring in an existing character, FBX, with existing bones and stuff is essentially this, which, you know, I mean, this character is way worse than anything else because it has so many bones, but you get this mess of bones that doesn't point in any logical direction, and that's just because of different, like, you know, forward axes and stuff like that. But you know, the thing is that you can't mess with this. This has to stay exactly as it is right now, and the only thing you can do to try and animate this is to work on top of this. There's nothing you can do that I know of. I mean, even in 3D Studio, when I get stuff like this, I don't touch it. Even if maybe there's some scripts floating around, which I don't know if they are, but even if there are some scripts floating around that is supposed to fix the bone orientation or whatever, you don't really want to mess with it because you might get stuff back into Unreal that isn't matching the original. This will match the original. So something I didn't mention before I imported, make sure that your preset, your units preset is set to centimeters, right, before you import. So set that, then import the thing, and then it should be good to go for Unreal, because in Unreal 1 unit equals 1 centimeter. So if you want to match that when you export, you don't want to have weird scaling issues, do that. So how do you start? Where did I start? So first thing I did, biggest problem on this thing is these sort of covers here. It's covering everything, you can't see anything. So the one thing that you don't need to care about is the mesh. You can actually completely delete the mesh, and you can still export animation, because you're only going to end up exporting the bones anyway when you export animation. So the mesh there is purely for visual reference when you animate. So what you can do is it's going to edit mode, and it's going to face mode. I'm gonna select similar by material. It's going to select all these things, and it's just a happy accident, I guess, that all these things have the same material. Otherwise you have to go through and sort of you know, what I would usually do is select the face and then grow the selection. It's Control plus. But what you'll find is that because the mesh is imported from a game engine, you know, from a export that comes from a game engine, all the vertices are going to be broken where there's either a UV island or a smoothing group or something like that. And I found in this case, like, there's these weird things that happen, like that, like this thing is, you know, loose and, you know, stuff like that. It's got some weird issues to it that makes it harder to deal with. And you can go in and select all the verts and basically do a weld. So you go and remove doubles. You can do that. I tend to not like doing that unless you can go through the whole mesh and make sure everything is still correct. And if it's a mesh that you didn't work with, it's sometimes hard to tell, like, is this thing supposed to be welded or not? I would generally assume that, like in 3D Studio, I would actually do that a lot, because in the edit poly mode, 3D Studio has two modes: edit poly mode and edit mesh mode. In edit mesh mode, it only cares about triangles. In edit poly mode, it will respect quads and n-gons and stuff like that. And so you can't weld verts that isn't a valid weld, if that makes any sense. And but Blender doesn't really care all that much. You'll just weld anything. You can pretty much weld any vert to any other vert, regardless of whether it'll break the rules of like what polygon can be next to another polygon, if it's not even part of the same plane or something like that. So I'm a little bit more cautious with that. But this works. So go type, press space to bring up the window. Just start typing similar and select similar. You have some choices, but material, like I said, it's just a happy accident that these things have their own material ID. So do that, and what is it? Oh, it's just P. Okay, so I was pressing Control P, but it's just P. I sometimes forget the shortcut still, because like I said, I'm still new to Blender. Okay, so P, and separate that. So that's actually, so the cool thing in Blender is that this will still retain the skinning information. So if I go into this bone and rotate it, it'll still have that. But now I can hide it. It's a separate thing, right? So that's cool. So it's still a mess. It's still sort of hard to see what the hell's going on, but we'll sort of figure things out. That's just the way it is. When you work with something that you didn't build, and you didn't build it from scratch to actually work exactly the way you wanted, you have to sort of reverse engineer stuff, and obviously that's a lot more work than doing your own thing from scratch. So I like to use ambient occlusion in the in the viewport there just to separate shapes. Makes much easier to kind of see what's going on. So I took this leg first to experiment with, because it's a multi, it's not like a simple elbow IK or a leg IK. It's like a multi-link IK, and I think it's about the worst case on this character. Everything else is either similar or less of a problem. So this is the leg that I kind of started with, and you can see the problem with the bone rotations and stuff like that. It's essentially, it's always going to be sideways or backwards or something like that. And yeah, IK, you can kind of try and set up IK on this directly, but it's going to be difficult, because you actually want the IK to follow the limb itself, and really what it's going to do is it's going to follow these points, these endpoints, and so your IK chain is going to be, like you can see, this is the endpoint for, this is where the bone is. I mean, I can go in a wireframe. Okay, so you can kind of see, I mean, that's where the bone is for this thing, right? And you want the IK to come into this actual pivot point here and not over here. So I mean, it's still gonna pivot over here, but the IK chain is gonna run up here instead of to the actual pivot point. So that's the biggest problem with working with stuff like this, but it's fixable. It just takes more work. So of course, if you built this character from scratch and you built all the and you added all the bones and stuff yourself, it'll all be correct. And it was correct for the guy that made it from Epic, maybe in Maya or whatever they used. It would have been correct and no problem. But you know, like I said, reverse engineering the thing, like bringing it in from FBX, you just have to like sort of start reverse engineering this stuff. So see if I can figure this out again. So we've got that sort of change. So I know I worked with this. This was yesterday that I kind of messed around with this. So I probably have already forgotten a bunch of steps that I did because I experimented quite a bit to find a really good way of setting this up that that really works. So yeah, so it's that bone goes to that bone, and then I ended up using this one to have a target to because I need to reorient these bones in my rig, but like I'm gonna create new bones for rigging purpose, and I need to basically reorient these. So I use this middle finger here, or I think it was part of the finger's claws or something. Okay, no, those are the claws, but whatever. So I use this one for the target of this one. So my IK is actually going to end on this bone. I'm not going to use this bone at all, but I used that for a target because I'm going to use some snapping to get things done. Okay, so Shift H, hide unselected, and now we've got the bones that we need. Right. So the IK needs to run from there to there to there to there to there. That's what the IK needs to do. And you can see these links crisscrossing and stuff. You don't want that when you're setting up IK. IK is just one of those things you want to just make your life as easy as possible with when you do IK. So now we can go into edit mode. Okay, wait, before I go into edit mode, I'm gonna stay in pose mode, select all, go out of pose mode, go into edit mode. Now everything is still selected. Now I can hide them again in edit mode as well. So while they're still selected, Shift D duplicates, and immediately go Control P to, no, not Control P, Alt P to wait, is it Alt P? Do I want to clear? Do I want to I'm just thinking if this is what I did. Let me just do that. Let's see. I think that's the one that I wanted to do. So let's make that wider so I can see what's going on. So I think that's this skeleton now. I still sometimes forget exactly the thing that I need to do, and then I'll just try things and see what works. But I think that was it. Like I know Alt P is to get deal with parenting, like clear parenting and whatever, and you get different options based on what you have selected. So this one, no, those are the meshes. Okay, let me just undo a few times here. If I can. Okay, yeah, there we go. Just see. Okay, there we go. Let's redo. Don't know. Shift Control Z. Okay, so this I really like. Max has a similar feature. Just press space and you can essentially search any command that you need. So if you forget the shortcut, you can just find it like that. Okay, so now duplicate it again, and so all I want to do is actually just P, separate bones. I think that was it. There we go. There's the new root. Yep, again the old shortcuts got me. So that's still sitting underneath this SK. So actually what I do is, in this case, I would actually, because this, when you export it, Unreal is going to see this as an extra parent. So in this case, go Alt P and clear parent. And so now you see the root is in the root of the scene and no longer underneath this. And I can do the same. So now this is essentially nothing, and we can kill that. So now we've got this new bones, and so now I can go into, let's just see, okay, yeah, so now I can go into, so now I need to adjust the bones so that they are actually correctly rotated. And the way I do that is, so first thing I do, I'm going to go into pose mode and just select one of the bones and view align. So it's shift, and then on the keypad, the number pad, so 1, 3, and 7 is for like, so 7 is top view, and then 1 is front, and then 3 is side. Now if you hold down shift, it will align the view perpendicular to the selected object. So this way you can get the bone that you have selected in a nice square view on the screen. Right, and now you can set your transforms to view and go to edit mode. And so what I also like to do for this is on the actual armature, I think it's in here, yeah, so on the display I switch on the axis so I can see if the thing does something weird. Now I've already done this and it didn't do anything weird, but I like to keep the axis on just so I can see if it flips or does something weird. So now I can select that, move it with G, and you can see it holds its axis there correctly, and I'm going to snap it there, but I need to set up the correct snapping, which is vertex. And now I can move, hold down control, and snap it to that bone there. So the bone that I see there now is, I'm just going to hide that because that's the other skeleton. I just don't want to see it right now. Go back to edit mode. So that bone goes there. So this one you can kind of see goes to that one. So I'm going to do that. Hold down control, snap it. Now you see this is why I also included this bone, so I have a place to take this bone. It's not exactly opposite to where it was, I don't think. It might be, but I don't think it is. I didn't really check. I know I don't think it is, but it doesn't matter. It's I just needed it to be facing the other way basically, and I like using points on the existing skeleton for that. So now I go back to top view and then just rotate out of it so I can get my view back properly. So now I've got the proper bones, and I can actually get rid of this bone in this skeleton, in this armature or whatever. So now I've got these bones in the correct orientation. So now if I rotate it, what is it? It's not, is it X? It's not set to local, it's set to view. Okay. So now the IK will run properly down the actual bone chain instead of in some weird positions. Okay, go out of pose mode. Let's get everything back. So now, now we can actually set up IK on this thing. So in a previous video that I did, I've shown a rig that I did for one of the creatures that I'm working on for my ninja game, and I spoke about using when you do IK and stuff like that, I spoke about using bones, just essentially copying the bone and have this sort of internal rig where the control objects are actually bones inside the skeleton, sort of, and then use that for the IK targets and stuff like that. The reasoning behind that is because and this is a big difference between Blender and 3D Studio. So in 3D Studio, bones are just objects in the scene, just like any other. In Blender, the armature is its own thing. So I can't go in and go into edit mode, select a bone, and unless I couldn't figure out how to do this, but I can't get like the actual coordinates or like transform on this. Like, I mean, this is the important thing. It's like getting the actual transform on this. So I want to align another object exactly on this axis of this bone, and because this armature is sort of its own thing, it's got sort of its own settings here. It's not like the world transform settings, and it just doesn't match anything else, and you can't align, you can't select an object and then align that object to this thing and stuff like that. Like I said, whether there is a way to do that or not, I have no idea. I couldn't figure it out. Like, it doesn't work with the normal alignment that you would normally be able to do. Selecting another object, this bone isn't seen as another object. It's a sub-object of the armature. The armature is the object. So if you try and align something to the armature, it just aligns it. You can align it to this point, which is useless, but the bones themselves are not seen as other objects in the scene. So yeah, so that's why it kind of makes sense just to duplicate an existing bone. You have the exact transforms that you need, stuff just aligns properly and so on. But for this rig, I wanted separate control objects. It's just the way I like working, actually. So anyway, let me add one. So I'm just going to move the thing to selected, the whatever that's called again, don't remember, and then add a in edit mode, add an empty object. I'm just using spheres in my other project, so I'm just gonna keep using spheres on this. So this is gonna be the main controller for this leg, but obviously it's misaligned from the bones, and and even though it's not super important for it to be aligned to the bones, I kind of like having that, because when you start rotating something, you want to have that local axis that is actually aligned to the structure that you're rotating from. So that's why, it can be useful to use, like, bones in there. The reason why I don't like the sort of the using bones inside of the skeleton is just because then you have to go into the armature and then go into pose mode. That's probably okay if I did a rig completely from scratch and get a little bit more experimentation and see how things work out, I might use that where you have like an actual control rig. So it only contains controllers, and then you have your controlling armature, and then you have your final game armature. And that wouldn't be a big deal to set up when you do it from scratch. You just essentially make duplicates of things. But again, because this is a custom job, I like using these external controllers. It just makes my brain happy. So so again, I'm gonna use the view align thing. So the only way I could figure out to actually align stuff to bones in Blender is like this, right? So go into pose mode, select this bone, use again shift click to align it, and I think I'm gonna use, I'll just use this one. Don't know if it matters, I haven't really tested it like that. So now I've got my view aligned. Now I can select this guy, and so this operation doesn't have a shortcut, but you can give it one depending on how much you use it. I did give it one, but I didn't save it. I always forget, like if you so you can go into object, I think it was transform, yeah. So this will align it to the view, and you can right click on that and then give it a shortcut. But then you have to go and save your user settings, otherwise it doesn't save the shortcut. So I'll probably end up doing that. I just need to find a shortcut that's a key combination. I think my previous shortcut was also overlapping, or I replaced another one. I don't want to do that, so I'll double check and make sure that I'm not using a key combination that's already used. Okay, it didn't do it. That's interesting. I think this has to be view, that's why. Of course. So there we go. So now, okay, just go top view again, and so I can get out of the weird rotation, and now the thing is perfectly aligned to the bone. So in 3D Studio you actually have an alignment tool. Just select the one object, activate the tool, click on the other object, and it aligns it. And because the bones are actually just also an object inside the scene like any other, it knows how to align to it. But like I said, in Blender, so you have this thing where you can duplicate. So let's do that. Let's rotate a little bit. So you have this where you can align two objects like that. I forgot what the actual, okay, it doesn't look like it has a shortcut anyway, but that's not the command anyway. I don't remember the command, but you can select one object, select the other object, and I'm trying to think. I'm trying to remember now what was the command. Probably somebody watching this, it's a little bit more used to Blender, will say, "Oh, it's that," and then, and then the object will just go boom and align to the other object, and that's what you want. But it doesn't work on bones. So, okay, so now we can do like accurate IK on this. So now we have this one, it's already aligned, and I can do my other control points. So the other thing I need to do, Control A, apply the scale, so that on the scale there it's 1 instead of some weird number because I scaled it. Go to local axis and duplicate that, and yeah, that's no good, but anyway. Okay, it went in world Z and not local Z. So you have to tap twice. I know you have to tap twice to go Z. Tap again, then you get the local axis. Forgot that. Okay, so it doesn't matter now. So G and hold down Control to snap to that. So snapping is still on vertex, so that's fine. So I just like to scale this one down because this isn't going to be a selectable or animatable control point. Essentially, it's just going to control this bone with IK, and it can be done in different ways. You can use rotation or orientation constraints, stuff like that. I kind of just went with the IK, just because. So again, I'm just gonna, it's just habit from, I like to reset the transforms on things. So, and then I also use one for the, so tap twice to get it on the local X. Let's put it about there. So this one is a little bit weird. It's the pole target, the IK pole target, and it needs to kind of go off to the side, which isn't, what you might want. You might want it like up there or something, but just because of the orientation of these bones and things like that, it just doesn't, like, that's just not what the IK is going to expect. So you just kind of have to put it, and it needs to go exactly perpendicular to this joint, because that's what it's going to expect to keep this exactly as is as soon as you apply IK to it. Now I parent that, control P, and parent that. Could have done them both, but anyway. So now, oops, we've got that situation going on. So at this point, before doing anything else, I would like to also use this same leg on the other side, because of course there's the exact mirror side leg. So the easiest way I've found to sort of do that and get everything exactly the right place, and you can duplicate it and mirror it, and that's all fine, but it's not going to be in exactly the right place. So to do that, just set that back to the center, add another empty, just make it a cube, and then I'm gonna parent this to, parent those two things to that. So now that cube controls everything, so now I can select everything duplicated, and that's not right, so kill that. What? Okay, that's still in pose mode. Always with the pose mode and then the edit mode. Okay, so that's also the kind of the weird thing with bones to me, that I have to get used to. With, again, in 3D Studio, bones are just there, right? You don't go into any mode to do things. The only thing that it has is an edit mode that you specifically go into if you want to move, move them around without messing with scaling and stuff like that. Exactly the same as in Blender, but you don't have a pose mode. That's the one that always gets me. So anyway, select all of that and duplicate it again. So now we've got it. Right click, snaps it back there, and now I can mirror it on X, and it's all good. It mirrors around that point. So now I have that as a, so if it ended up in the wrong place, like when I was testing it, it ended up like in that place, and I guess it depends on the selection that you have. But in that case, I have a point that is supposed to be on 0, so I can either just zero it out or just snap it to the grid. If the snapping worked, which it doesn't for some reason. That's interesting. So it's supposed to snap directly to the grid, but it's not for some reason. Not exactly sure why. Maybe that's why. Yeah, that was why. Okay, so it needs to be in global. Just keep it in global anyway. That's the better way. So that's why I do this, just so I have basically a guaranteed snapping point for this thing. So now I can actually get rid of that, but if I just get rid of this now, right, this is going to happen. Boom. That's no good. So I have to deparent, basically call it deparenting, right? So Alt P and clear and keep transformation. And the same with this one. Clear and keep transformation. So now I can delete that thing. So when you do that, just see if it actually did that now. I think it's all right. Yeah, so that should be all right. And I can just delete this one because everything on there was actually already correct. So now I have both. So I do this before I do IK, and I think maybe you can do it after you do IK. I've noticed some. I remember in one of my experiments I had some problems with this stuff. So I create the setup and then I mirror and then I do like the complicated stuff. Just to avoid any weirdness, I guess. So now finally we get to IK, so go there. So this is going to be the, so what was it? So it's this one. And it's going to use this target over here. And it's got the pole target over there, and it should be good for, okay, forgot one thing, the chain length. So there we've got a good IK, right? No real weirdness going on. So specifically for this leg, because it has this little kink in it over here, you can control that. See, that's not very cool. You can control that by coming on, selecting this and going to the bone, going to the IK settings, and I found that 0.5 on this seems to do a good job. So on the x-axis, because the x is that's the one that it rotates around. And now you see it kind of holds its shape there much better, right? And doing this one, so so that's going to control this bone needs to rotate basically on its own, right? Okay, so that top leg rotates because of the pole target. It's going to keep following the pole target, of course, right? But I need to rotate this one sort of by rotating this thing, and so that's why I've got the IK set up. So rotating this thing is actually gonna move this thing. And like I said, you can set up a orientation constraint for this. I think the reason why I didn't do that in my first experiment and why I ended up just using IK was because of the alignment of this thing. So that will only work if this thing is aligned exactly to this bone's axis. So that's but you know, otherwise you can get away with just using IK. You know, IK ultimately might be the safer route depending on, you know, alignment capabilities, but anyway, they both do exactly the same thing, so it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to add IK to that. It's going to be a single length. It's going to point to this thing, And I think I used the same pole target. So now when I rotate that thing, it's gonna rotate that thing, the sort of the arm, the bottom, the hand, and there we get that. That's cool. There we get like the whole thing because of the pole target. It's gonna control the arm there, which is kind of what you want there, but you know, I mean, you know, the setups can go in different ways. I tend to do this, and when I animate, if I don't want the arm to go that way, I'll just rotate that and then pull this back or whatever, you know. It's like, it's sort of safer to link the pole target to this thing, so you will generally keep the shape of this correct, and then only if you don't want it, you know, you kind of have to think about it in the sense that what do you want more. Okay, so so that's that part of it. So now we've got a good IK, right? This thing works. And now need to hook up the rest, the actual bones that matter, which are these ones, these screwed up ones. Okay, so now it's just a matter of actually going to pose mode and doing the constraints. So going to the bone constraints. Let me just think about it. Okay, so I did end up using wait, what's going on here? It's like that. The bone constraints, copy rotation. I'm going to copy rotation from this object, and so the bone naming, because I just duplicated this, you can just see there, front over arm ball A, over arm ball A, just match it, and make this local, local. And so I'm gonna need to invert, I think I needed to invert these, the Y and the Z, for whatever reason, most likely because of rotating that. So because these pivot points don't actually match, so you see you get like that thing going on there. So it's affecting it, it's just affecting it not right, but it's fine there. So X is fine, right? That's the X-axis running across. X is fine, but I think I had to mirror both those to fix that problem. So there you go. So now we've got that bone following. Next up, we've got this one. That's going to follow this one. So copy rotation. So when I say orientation constraint, that's just the naming convention from 3D Studio. This is actually what I mean, copy rotation. I'm going to go local. And I can't remember if I had to invert that one as well. Let's see just now. I think because this one is inverted, because it's in local space, it kind of fixes the rest of them, but I don't remember now. And this is the elbow A. Okay. Okay, we've got a second joint working, cool. Now we've got this guy. Copy rotation. Go local. It's gonna be this guy, and that is elbow B, of course. And, we've got that going on. It works sideways, works. Cool. Next. So this is basically the process. I mean, this is this is essentially what a whole bunch of these, because it's got like I think 6 legs, and then it's got these like arms with miniguns on them, and I think it all need the same sort of setup. And so there's a bunch of IK that needs to be set up, and essentially I would probably deal with all of it exactly like this. So you've got the elbow C, and that should be the whole arm now, I think, except for the last little piece. Looking good. And then this one, sort of a mishmash of stuff here. So what I also do is go into the armature and then display these bones as sticks. So I know exactly that this is the other one, right? It's a little more clear. Yeah, they're thinner. I probably should make these ones sticks and then keep these ones, but whatever. So this one's going to follow this one. It's going to copy rotation from there. Go to local space, and of course, which bone do I follow? I think it was, yeah, ball B. Right. Now we should have a completely working arm, I think. I don't think there was anything else, so let's see. Unhide that, hide that, grab that. So now we've got a completely working arm. IK, we can rotate that. Did I screw something up? Rotation looks a little weird. Just undo that. I think it was just because it was misaligned from the view. I wasn't rotating in the actual axis. So we go to X, double tap that to get local. So there we go. Perfect rotation on that. And double tap the R to get like a all axis rotation. That's good. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so that's pretty much what I wanted to show in this video. Because this translates to most of these parts. I mean, we've got this arm, we've got this arm, that one. This is the minigun arm, like folded up. And there's still this back leg, so there's like 4 main legs, and then this top arm on both sides, and then this sort of minigun arms. And they'll all essentially use this procedure. I mean, this is kind of where I'm at. Like, I've done some naming and a little bit of extra stuff on my other file, but this is pretty much where I'm, where I'm at with working on this thing. And I'll see, and I'll work on it a little bit more, and I'll see if I do any more unique things that I haven't shown in this video. Then I'll also make another video. But this is basically the procedure, and then when you're finally done with the rig, just go to pose mode and unhide all. Wasn't in pose mode. Go to pose mode, unhide all. Go to edit mode, unhide all. Right. So when you've got your rig, you can go ahead and animate this thing and do whatever you like. And when you export, make sure it's in object mode, of course. So when you export, just select this. None of this other stuff matters, right? Only this original bones matter when you export. So you do that. So I've got a shortcut, export FBX. So I'm just gonna go export. And so the settings that you would want to do is you go enable selected objects. So I wish this would actually be default because I never not do this. So make sure selected objects is on there, because you're only going to export the bones. And then on the animation part, disable these two things and export. So of course I don't have an animation, but I'll just export it on top of this one. I did double click it. So there you go, that's the export. And then let's actually see. So of course, okay, so let me just do this from so when you import, select that, and then just make sure you select the correct skeleton. So that was the Death Blossom skeleton, and then import it. Right. So there it is. There's the pose I just exported. Right. It's not going to animate because okay. So that's why it took so long to export, because it was exporting all 250 frames of nothingness. But anyway. So yeah, so I mean this kind of this whole procedure, however you end up rigging this original skeleton, just keep in mind that you don't mess with this skeleton directly. You can IK, like if this skeleton looked proper, let me just switch this back to normal bones. If the skeleton actually looked proper, like the one I created separately, like this, you can totally go in and apply the IK directly to the skeleton. You'll have your extra separated out control objects, and you can apply the IK, and that's all good to go. But because these bones are so screwed up, it's tough to work with them. And it's tough to apply stuff like IK because they're just not in the correct orientation. You're just going to struggle getting a nice IK out of it. And so that's why you need to actually do these extra bones and stuff like that. I will say that typically I like to keep a separate skeleton anyway for rigging, so I can do whatever I like, knowing that whatever I do isn't going to ever break my game skeleton. You know, I can you know, link stuff to it, I can do weird things to it, and it's never ever going to affect the game skeleton. So I do like to use two skeletons. I'll create a game skeleton and I'll create a rig skeleton, and I'll just hook up, just like I did copy rotation, I'll hook up the game skeleton to the rig skeleton, and it just drives the game skeleton. And you can do whatever you like to the rig skeleton. It's not going to break anything to the game, you know, on the game skeleton. So this video is a little bit long, but I guess I just wanted to make it sort of, I generally, well, I never edit any of my videos. I just make it, and you know, I feel like if you want to skip forward, you can do that, right? But anyway, so that's it for this video. Like I said, if I come across anything else that's a little weird or maybe completely different in setting up this character, then I'll make another video out of it. But I wanted to make this video just to show that it's not that difficult really to deal with a setup like this. It's just about knowing the tools, and you know, I'm still learning Blender, but generally I would know what I want to do. I just need to figure out how Blender does it in comparison to 3D Studio. So yep, I guess that's it for this video, and thanks for watching.